He paraded his new fiancée in front of me, until I revealed the baby my billionaire ex-husband hid from. Part 2, the hospital monitor beeped erratically as I clutched my swollen belly, pain tearing through me like lightning. 30 weeks pregnant with twins and everything was going wrong. Julian, I can't lose them. I gasped, gripping his hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. You won't. Julian's voice cracked as he brushed the hair from my forehead. You won't lose anyone, Nora. I promise. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Layton appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. We need to do an emergency C-section. Now. But it's too soon. I cried, panic rising like a tide. They're too small. From the doorway came a small voice that broke my heart. Mommy. There stood Clara, our 4-year-old daughter, clutching her grandfather's hand, her Blackwood blue eyes wide with fear. Why is everyone yelling? Is Mommy going to heaven like your science friend did? Behind her, I could see both sets of grandparents in the hallway, the tension between them visible even now. Robert Blackwood already on his phone, trying to fly in specialists, while my father stood helplessly by, the former physics teacher powerless against biology gone wrong. Julian knelt before Clara, his voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. No one is going to heaven today. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? For Mommy? For your brother and sister? Have you ever had your perfect second chance tested by an unexpected challenge? A moment when everything you carefully rebuilt seemed to be crumbling around you. This is the story of how our family patched together from broken pieces and new beginnings faced its greatest test, and how we discovered that sometimes love isn't just about second chances, but third and fourth ones too. 18 months earlier, our lives had finally settled into a rhythm that felt right. After years apart, months of cautious reconnection, and the revelation of a daughter Julian hadn't known existed, we created something I never thought possible, a genuine family built on honesty, compromise, and a love that had matured through hardship. Julian, have you seen Clara's purple dinosaur? I called out, searching through the toy basket in our living room. We can't leave for school without it. It's already in her backpack. Julian appeared in the doorway, Clara perched on his hip. I packed it last night after she fell asleep. At 4 years old, Clara was every inch her father's daughter, those distinctive Blackwood blue eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the analytical way she assessed every situation. But she had my curls and olive complexion, my tendency to furrow her brow when concentrating. Julian set her down, straightening the collar of her private preschool uniform. A concession I'd made after considerable research convinced me the school's science-focused curriculum was actually perfect for Clara's curious mind. Ready for school, sweetheart? I asked, kneeling to her level. She nodded solemnly. We're learning about metamorphosis today. Butterflies and stuff. Julian and I exchanged amused glances over her head. Clara's vocabulary had always been advanced, but hearing scientific terms from a 4-year-old still caught us by surprise. Metamorphosis, huh? Julian grabbed his suit jacket from the back of a chair. Like how caterpillars transform into butterflies. Clara rolled her eyes with dramatic flair. That's what I just said, Daddy. Our morning routine had become a well-choreographed dance. Julian would take Clara to school on his way to Blackwood Industries, where he'd negotiated a more flexible schedule that allowed him to be home for dinner most nights. I would head to the research center where my team was making significant progress on non-invasive prenatal testing for rare genetic disorders. In the evenings, we'd reconvene as a family dinner together at our dining table, bath time for Clara, stories before bed, and then adult time for Julian and me to catch up, connect, and simply be together without the weight of past mistakes hanging over us. It wasn't perfect. Julian still struggled with his father's expectations for the Blackwood empire. I still occasionally worked late when research breakthroughs demanded my attention. But we'd learned to communicate, to compromise, to understand that our differences weren't weaknesses but strengths that balanced our family. Our new home was neither a Blackwood mansion nor my modest apartment, but a spacious brownstone in a family-friendly neighborhood with excellent schools. It represented our fresh start. Julian's family money made it possible, but my practical sensibilities kept it from being ostentatious. That particular morning, the one that would unknowingly set our lives on a new and unexpected path, Julian kissed me goodbye at the door, Clara already buckling herself into her car seat in his more family-appropriate luxury SUV. "Don't forget we have the Blackwood Foundation Gala tonight." His expression held a hint of apology. "Mother has been planning it for months." I groaned slightly. The Foundation's annual fundraising gala was one of those Blackwood obligations I'd learned to tolerate. An evening of champagne, small talk with New York's elite, and inevitable scrutiny from society columnists who still love to analyze my relationship with Julian. I know. I've got the dress, the babysitter is confirmed, and I promise not to mention genetic markers during dinner conversation. Julian laughed, pulling me close for another kiss. That happened one time, and Senator Mitchell was genuinely interested. He was being polite. And I was being boring. Never boring. Julian's voice softened. Never that. As they pulled away, Clara waving enthusiastically from the back seat, I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, our carefully balanced lives would be upended in ways we couldn't imagine. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was held in the grand ballroom of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, while New York's wealthiest citizens mingled in designer formalwear, champagne flutes in hand. Julian stood by my side, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of my back. In his perfectly tailored tuxedo, he looked every inch the Blackwood heir, confident, commanding, completely at ease in this world of privilege and power. Yet the man I now knew was so much more than that polished exterior. He was a devoted father who built block towers for hours without complaint, a partner who respected my career as much as his own, a man who had learned that real strength came from vulnerability, not control. "Nora, darling." Eleanor Blackwood approached, elegant as always in midnight blue silk. "You look lovely. That shade of emerald suits you perfectly." "Thank you, Eleanor." The dress had been her suggestion, a designer piece that probably cost more than my first car. "You've outdone yourself with the gala this year." Eleanor beamed, accepting the compliment. "The guest list is exceptional. The governor just arrived, and I believe that's the newest Nobel laureate in physics by the BA.R.M. Father would be impressed." I smiled, thinking of Dad back at our brownstone, babysitting Clara with far more enthusiasm than he'd ever show for a black tie event. "Speaking of fathers, have you seen mine?" Julian asked, glancing around the crowded room. Eleanor's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "With the Japanese investors, I believe. You know how he gets when there's business to be done, even at charity events." Julian nodded, unsurprised. Robert Blackwood viewed every gathering as a potential business opportunity, even his own foundation's fundraiser. As the evening progressed, I found myself actually enjoying the event more than expected. Julian's mother had seated us with several medical researchers whose work complemented my own, leading to fascinating discussions that almost made me forget I was wearing uncomfortable heels and a dress that required strategic breathing. Julian had just returned from speaking with the Foundation's board members when I noticed something odd. He looked pale, his normally confident demeanor replaced by something that resembled nervousness. "Are you all right?" I whispered, touching his arm. "Fine." He managed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just, Foundation politics. Nothing important." Before I could press further, the lights dimmed and Eleanor took the stage to welcome guests officially and introduce the Foundation's initiatives for the coming year. Julian tensed beside me as his mother spoke eloquently about the Blackwood legacy of philanthropy and innovation. "And now," Eleanor concluded, "I'd like to invite my son, Julian Blackwood, to share some exciting news about the Foundation's future direction." Julian squeezed my hand once before rising and making his way to the stage. I watched with growing confusion as he adjusted the microphone, his expression serious but determined. "Thank you, Mother." Julian's voice carried confidently across the hushed ballroom. The Blackwood Foundation has always been committed to improving lives through innovation, education, and medical advancement. He paused, his gaze finding mine in the crowd. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce a significant expansion of our medical research division, with a particular focus on maternal and pediatric health. This initiative holds special meaning for my family, as my wife Dr. Nora Rivera's groundbreaking work in prenatal genetic screening has inspired much of this new direction. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Julian continued outlining ambitious plans for research grants, hospital partnerships, and educational programs. I listened with growing pride, touched that he had incorporated my work so centrally into the Foundation's mission. When he returned to our table, I leaned close. "You didn't tell me about any of this." He smiled, some of his earlier tension easing. "I wanted it to be a surprise. A good one, I hope." "Of course, but there's more." Julian took my hand under the table. "Something I couldn't announce publicly yet. Something I wanted to tell you first, but the timing never seemed right." A flutter of anxiety passed through me. "What is it?" Before he could answer, Robert Blackwood appeared at our table, commanding attention with his mere presence. In his 70s now, Julian's father still carried himself with the authority of a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. Impressive speech. Robert nodded curtly at his son. "Though you might have discussed the financial commitments with me beforehand." Julian met his father's gaze evenly. "The board approved the budget last week. You copied all the documents." I skimmed them. Robert's attention shifted to me. "Dr. Rivera, I understand your research inspired this new initiative." "In part." I maintained the calm, professional demeanor I'd learned to adopt around Robert. Though Julian has always been passionate about improving healthcare access. Robert made a non-committal sound, clearly unconvinced. "Well, it's done now." He glanced back at Julian. "Your mother wants photos with the governor before he leaves. Both of you should come." It wasn't a request. In Robert's world, it never was. The photo session stretched longer than anticipated, with Eleanor orchestrating various combinations of board members, major donors, and political figures alongside the Blackwood family. By the time we finished, the event was winding down, guests beginning to depart in a procession of black town cars and limousines. Julian seemed distracted as we collected our things, checking his phone repeatedly with an uncharacteristic nervousness. "What's going on?" I finally asked as we settled into the back of our own car. "And don't tell me nothing. I know that look." Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that always emerged when he was troubled. "Remember when I said there was something I wanted to tell you first?" "Yes. I've accepted a position on the board of Mount Sinai Hospital," Julian said quickly. "Starting next month." I blinked, surprised but not alarmed. "That's wonderful. It aligns perfectly with the Foundation's new direction." "There's more." He reached for my hand. "The position requires significant commitment, especially initially. Meetings, events, fundraising. Julian, I understand demanding schedules. We've managed to balance. I've arranged to step back from daily operations at Blackwood Industries." He finally met my eyes. "To focus on the Foundation and this board position. To be more present at home." Now I was truly shocked. "Your father agreed to this?" "Not initially." Julian's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "There were several heated discussions. But I made my position clear, family comes first. Clara is growing so quickly, and I've already missed too much of her life." The significance of this decision wasn't lost on me. Julian Blackwood, heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, choosing to step back from the role he'd been groomed for since birth was unprecedented. "Are you sure about this?" I asked softly. "More sure than I've ever been about anything." His expression grew serious. "Nora, watching you with Clara, how completely you love her, how you've balanced motherhood with your career, it's made me realize what truly matters. And it's not another acquisition or merger. The intensity in his eyes made my heart race in a way that still surprised me after all our years together, apart, and together again. There's something else. I've been thinking. He hesitated, seemingly searching for words unusual for a man normally so articulate. What would you think about expanding our family? The question caught me completely off guard. Another child? Julian nodded, watching my reaction carefully. Clara's thriving, we're in a good place, the new house has plenty of room. And I'd like to experience it all this time, the pregnancy, the birth, those first moments. A cascade of emotions washed through me: surprise, consideration, a flutter of excitement at the idea of another child, one Julian would know from the very beginning. It's a lot to think about, I said honestly. My research is at a critical phase, and Clara is still adjusting to our new family dynamic. Of course. His reply was immediate, understanding. There's no rush. Just something to consider. As our car glided through nighttime Manhattan toward home, I found myself contemplating this unexpected proposition. Another child, a sibling for Clara, a baby Julian would know from conception, a new chapter in our reconstituted family story. Little did I know that fate had already made the decision for us. 2 weeks later, I sat in my office bathroom staring at a plastic stick with 2 very clear pink lines. At 41, I had assumed any pregnancy would require planning, possibly medical intervention. Yet here was undeniable evidence that life had other ideas. That I performed 2 more tests, each confirming what the first had indicated. Then I sat on the cold tile floor, my mind racing with calculations and considerations. My research project was approaching its most critical phase. Clara had just settled into her new preschool routine. Julian and I were still finding our balance as a reunited couple. A baby would change everything. Again. After the initial shock faded, a tentative joy began to bloom. This was what Julian had wanted: another child, a chance to experience everything he'd missed with Clara. And despite the complicated timing, I found myself warming to the idea of another little person with Julian's eyes and my stubborn determination. I decided to wait until the weekend to tell him to plan something special rather than blurting it out between meetings or over a hasty breakfast. This news deserved a proper moment. But my body had other plans. Dr. Rivera. My assistant knocked tentatively on my office door the following day. Are you all right? You've been looking a bit pale all morning. I'm fine, Maya. Just a little tired. I attempted a reassuring smile while fighting another wave of nausea. Morning sickness that had apparently decided afternoon was also a suitable time to make an appearance. If you're sure. She hesitated. Dr. Layton asked if you could join the department meeting in 10 minutes. The board representatives are here to discuss funding allocations. The meeting. I'd completely forgotten. I'll be right there. As Maya left, I took several deep breaths, willing the nausea to subside. This was an important meeting. Representatives from the hospital board would be determining budget priorities for the coming year, and my research needed their continued support. I gathered my presentation materials and made my way to the conference room, where Peter Layton was already setting up the projector. The sight of my mentor and friend, the man who had delivered Clara and kept my secret during those difficult months of pregnancy and divorce, brought immediate comfort. Nora. He smiled warmly. Ready to dazzle them with science? As I'll ever be. I managed a weak smile in return. The meeting began with standard departmental updates before moving to funding proposals. When my turn came, I stood and began presenting our latest research findings with as much enthusiasm as I could muster. The room was warm, almost stifling, but I pressed on through slides of data and future projections. Midway through explaining a particularly promising breakthrough, the room began to tilt oddly. The faces of board members blurred, their expressions morphing from interest to concern. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Dr. Rivera. A voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you? The floor rushed up to meet me, and darkness descended. I woke to the concerned face of Peter Layton hovering over me, the cool surface of the conference room floor beneath me, and the embarrassing knowledge that I had just fainted in front of the entire hospital board. "Don't try to sit up yet." Peter's voice was professionally calm but laced with personal concern. "Just lie still for a moment." "What happened?" I asked, though I had a sinking suspicion. "You fainted." Peter kept his voice low, aware of the murmuring board members being efficiently ushered from the room by my assistant. "When was the last time you ate?" "Breakfast. I think." The details of the morning seemed hazy. Peter studied me with the shrewd assessment of a physician who had known me for years. "Nora, is there any chance you might be pregnant?" The directness of the question, asked in a room where others might overhear, broke through my professional composure. Tears sprang to my eyes, confirmation enough for Peter's experienced observation. "I see." He helped me to a sitting position, keeping his voice pitched for my ears alone. "How far along?" "I don't know. A few weeks. I just found out yesterday." Peter nodded, his expression shifting to clinical concern. "Any unusual symptoms beyond the obvious fatigue and nausea?" "No. I think it's just normal first trimester exhaustion." I felt a flash of embarrassment. I didn't faint with Clara. Every pregnancy is different. He helped me to my feet once he was satisfied I was stable. "And you're a few years older now, working just as hard if not harder." The conference room had emptied of all but a few concerned colleagues, including Maya, who hovered anxiously by the door. "I'm fine," I assured everyone, summoning the confident doctor persona that had carried me through countless professional challenges. "Just a combination of low blood sugar and overheating. Nothing some lunch won't fix." Nobody looked entirely convinced, but they tactfully accepted my explanation. All except Peter, who insisted on escorting me back to my office. "You need to make an appointment with OB immediately," he said once we were alone. "Given your age and the fainting episode, they'll want to monitor you closely." "I will," I promised, sinking gratefully into my office chair. "But Peter, please don't mention this to anyone yet. I haven't even told Julian. My secret is safe, as always." Peter's expression softened. "But Nora, call him. Now. Don't wait for the perfect moment to share this news." I nodded, knowing he was right. The dramatics of fainting at work had eliminated any possibility of a carefully planned announcement. Julian deserved to know immediately, especially given how enthusiastic he'd been about the possibility of another child. After Peter left, I closed my office door and dialed Julian's number, heart racing with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Nora?" Julian answered on the second ring, background noise suggesting he was at the Blackwood offices. "Everything okay?" "Yes. Mostly." I took a deep breath. "Are you somewhere you can talk privately?" A pause, then the background noise faded. "I am now." "What's going on?" "I'm pregnant." The words tumbled out, unplanned and unadorned. Silence stretched across the line, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Julian? I'm here." His voice, when it finally came, was thick with emotion. "You're sure?" 3 positive tests, plus I just fainted in the middle of a board presentation, so, yes, pretty sure. "You fainted? Are you alright? Do you need me?" "I'm fine," I assured him quickly. "Just the standard first trimester symptoms." "But I thought you should know right away." Another pause, shorter this time. Then a sound I hadn't expected, Julian laughing, a joyful, almost boyish laugh that erased years from his voice. "We're having a baby," he said, wonder evident in each word. "A baby we'll both know from the beginning." His happiness was infectious, easing my own anxieties about timing and logistics. "Yes. We are. I'm coming to get you," Julian declared. "We're celebrating. Tonight. I'll call Mother to watch Clara." Julian, you don't need to. He interrupted firmly. This is. Nora, this is everything. Let me do this. I relented, unable to deny him this moment of joy and celebration. We agreed to meet at an upscale restaurant near the hospital, one with private dining rooms where we could talk without interruption. As I hung up, a wave of emotion washed over me: gratitude for this second chance with Julian, wonder at the new life growing inside me, and a tentative excitement about the future we were building together. If my fainting episode was any indication, this pregnancy would be different from my experience with Clara. But one crucial element had changed this time: I wouldn't be facing it alone. Julian was waiting when I arrived at the restaurant, having secured a secluded corner table despite the last-minute reservation. He stood as I approached, and the expression on his face, pure wonder mixed with concern and love, made my heart swell. He embraced me carefully, as if I might break, then pulled back to study my face. "You're pale. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," I assured him, settling into the chair he held for me. Just the usual pregnancy symptoms, plus the embarrassment of collapsing in front of the hospital board. Julian ordered sparkling water for himself, refusing wine in solidarity with my new limitations. When the server departed, he reached across the table to take my hand. "Tell me everything. When did you find out? How are you feeling? Have you seen a doctor yet?" I laughed at his barrage of questions, so reminiscent of Clara's curious nature. "One at a time. I just found out yesterday. I was planning to tell you this weekend. And no, I haven't seen a doctor yet, but I will tomorrow." Julian nodded, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "How do you feel about it? Really?" The question was asked with such genuine concern, such openness to my true feelings, that I took a moment to consider my honest answer. "Surprised. Definitely surprised," I admitted. "A little anxious about the timing with my research and Clara and everything else. But also, happy. Especially seeing your reaction." Relief washed over his features. "I know the timing isn't what we might have planned. But Nora, I meant what I said about wanting another child. About wanting to experience everything I missed with Clara. I know. And it means so much that you're already stepping back from Blackwood Industries. That will make this whole transition easier." Julian hesitated, a shadow crossing his expression. "About that. My father is resisting the transition timeline. He wants me to delay stepping back until next quarter." My heart sank slightly. So much for perfect timing. "But," Julian continued quickly, seeing my reaction, "I won't let him dictate this. Not anymore. Not with a baby coming. I've already spoken with the board about accelerating the leadership transition." The determination in his voice reminded me of how far we'd come from our first marriage, how Julian had learned to stand up to his father, to prioritize our family above Blackwood expectations. Our celebratory dinner continued with discussions of practical matters: when to tell Clara, how to arrange my research schedule around prenatal appointments, whether the nursery should be yellow or green. Simple, joyful planning that carried us through the evening on a wave of shared excitement. It wasn't until we were home, relieving the babysitter and checking on a sleeping Clara, that the first complication of our expanding family emerged. "Mother wants to host a dinner this weekend," Julian mentioned as we prepared for bed. "To celebrate the new Mount Sinai position." I groaned softly, already exhausted at the thought of another formal Blackwood gathering. "Can we postpone? I'm not sure I can handle Eleanor's 5-course meals with this morning sickness." Julian considered this, sitting on the edge of our bed. "We could tell them about the pregnancy instead. That would certainly shift Mother's focus from the board position." The prospect of revealing our news to the elder Blackwoods brought mixed feelings. Eleanor would be thrilled: another grandchild to dote on, another Blackwood heir to continue the family legacy. Robert's reaction was less predictable. He had eventually accepted Clara after initial skepticism, but his primary concern had always been the Blackwood succession plan, which my pregnancy would undoubtedly complicate further. "Let's wait," I decided. Just until I've seen the doctor and know everything's progressing normally. Given my age, there are more risks. Julian nodded, understanding my caution. We'll postpone the dinner. I'll tell Mother you're tied up with research deadlines. As we settled into bed, Julian's hand came to rest protectively over my still flat stomach, a gesture of connection to the tiny life we created. In that peaceful moment, I allowed myself to imagine our future Clara as a big sister, Julian experiencing all the milestones he'd missed the first time, our family expanding in ways we'd never anticipated when we'd cautiously reunited after years apart. Little did I know that this pregnancy would test our reconstructed family in ways we couldn't imagine, bringing both unexpected joy and unprecedented challenges. My first prenatal appointment brought the biggest surprise of all. Dr. Chen, an OB/GYN specialist recommended by Peter, performed a routine ultrasound at what we estimated to be 8 weeks gestation. Julian held my hand as we watched the screen, both of us slightly nervous but excited to see our baby for the first time. The doctor moved the ultrasound wand over my abdomen, studying the screen with professional concentration. After a moment, she smiled. "There's your baby." She pointed to a small shape on the screen. Strong heartbeat, measuring right on track for 8 weeks. Julian's grip on my hand tightened, his eyes fixed on the tiny fluttering heart visible on the monitor. I felt a surge of emotion seeing our child so small yet already determined to grow, to become. Then Dr. Chen moved the wand slightly, her smile widening. "And there's your other baby." The room went silent. Julian and I stared at the screen, then at each other, then back at the screen where two distinct shapes were clearly visible. "Twins." I finally managed, my voice barely audible. "Fraternal twins." Dr. Chen confirmed, pointing out the separate amniotic sacs. "2 babies, developing normally from what I can see." Julian made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. "2 babies. We're having twins." The doctor nodded, continuing her examination while explaining what we were seeing. 2 separate placentas, 2 separate sacs. This type of twin pregnancy results from 2 eggs being fertilized separately. As she continued the ultrasound, checking measurements and heartbeats, Julian and I remained in stunned silence, processing this unexpected development. 1 baby would have been an adjustment to our carefully balanced lives. 2 babies simultaneously was a seismic shift. When the examination concluded and Dr. Chen left us to dress and collect our thoughts, Julian finally spoke. "Twins." He repeated, as if testing the word. "Clara's going to have 2 siblings at once." The reality was beginning to sink in, bringing with it a wave of practical concerns. "We'll need 2 of everything. 2 cribs, 2 car seats, double the diapers, double the feedings." Julian's expression shifted from shock to determination, the look he got when facing a particularly complex business challenge. "We can handle this. We'll hire help, reconfigure the nursery plans, adjust work schedules." His immediate pivot to solutions was so characteristically Julian that I had to smile despite my own anxiety. "It's not just the logistics," I reminded him gently. "Twin pregnancies are higher risk, especially at my age. There's a greater chance of complications, premature birth, developmental issues." Julian's expression sobered. "What does that mean for your health? For the babies?" "It means more monitoring, more precautions." I placed a hand on my stomach, already feeling protective of the 2 tiny lives developing inside. "Possibly bed rest later in the pregnancy, depending on how things progress. Whatever you need, whatever they need, it's done." Julian's voice held that tone of absolute certainty I'd come to both appreciate and occasionally challenge during our relationship. "I'll rearrange everything. Work, schedules, the house, whatever it takes." As we left the doctor's office with a folder of twin-specific prenatal information and a follow-up appointment scheduled in 2 weeks, the magnitude of our new reality began to settle around us. Twins. 2 babies at once. Double the joy, double the challenge, double the transformation of our already complex family dynamic. Julian helped me into the car, handling me with a new carefulness that would have been amusing if it wasn't so touching. His phone rang as he started the engine. His father, according to the display. Julian silenced it without answering. I should call him back, he said, though he made no move to do so. You should. I agreed. And we should probably tell your parents about the pregnancy sooner rather than later. Especially now that it's twins. Julian nodded, his expression growing more serious. They'll want to be involved. Especially Mother. You know how she was with Clara. I did indeed. Eleanor Blackwood had transformed into the quintessential grandmother when Clara entered her life, showering her with attention, educational toys, and carefully selected designer clothing. With twins, 2 more Blackwood heirs, her enthusiasm would undoubtedly intensify. We'll set boundaries, I said firmly. Make it clear from the beginning what kind of involvement we're comfortable with. Julian's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Setting boundaries with my mother is like trying to contain a hurricane with a picket fence, but we'll try. As we drove home, I found myself thinking about Clara's reaction to the news. At 4, she was old enough to understand the basic concept of becoming a big sister, but how would she feel about sharing our attention with 2 new siblings at once? She had only recently adjusted to having Julian fully in her life. Now she would have to adapt to an entirely new family configuration. When would be the right time to tell her? How should we explain it? These questions occupied my mind as Julian navigated through Manhattan traffic, occasionally glancing at me with an expression of wonder that suggested he was still processing our unexpected news. Meanwhile, Julian's phone continued to light up with calls from his father, 3 in the span of 20 minutes, each ignored in favor of our private moment together. Whatever Robert Blackwood wanted, it would have to wait. Today belonged to us and the surprising new chapter of our family story. If you've ever had your carefully laid plans completely upended by unexpected news, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories. In our next video, you'll see how our family navigated telling a 4-year-old she was becoming a big sister to twins, and how the Blackwood grandparents reacted to the news that would change all of our lives forever. Telling Clara about the twins was our first challenge as we navigated this unexpected expansion of our family. We decided on a weekend morning, when Clara was typically at her most receptive, and we'd have the entire day to answer questions and address any concerns. Julian and I had carefully selected a children's book about becoming a big sister, along with a small wrapped gift, a big sister t-shirt and a doctor's kit toy, combining her love of dress-up with her growing interest in medicine like Mommy. Clara, we have something special to tell you. Julian began as we sat together on the living room floor, her favorite spot for family conversations. She looked up from her puzzle, immediately alert to the serious tone in Julian's voice. Is it about the secret phone calls? Julian and I exchanged surprised glances. What secret phone calls, sweetheart? I asked. The ones you and Daddy have when you think I'm not listening. And why you keep running to the bathroom in the morning. Clara's powers of observation never ceased to amaze me. You're very observant. Julian smiled, though I could see he was recalibrating his approach. That's actually part of what we want to talk about. We presented the book first, reading it together as Clara studied the illustrations with serious concentration. When we reached the page showing parents bringing home a new baby, she frowned slightly. So I'm getting a baby? Her tone was neutral, carefully masking whatever emotions might be swirling beneath. Actually, I said gently, you're getting 2 babies. Mommy has 2 babies growing in her tummy right now. Clara's eyes widened, immediately dropping to my still flat stomach. 2. At the same time? Yes, they're called twins. Julian explained. 2 babies who will be born together. They're very tiny right now, but they'll grow bigger over the next few months, and then they'll be born around springtime. Clara processed this information with characteristic thoroughness, her brow furrowed in the expression she'd inherited from me. Will they take my room? She finally asked, zeroing in on one of her primary concerns. No, sweetheart. I assured her. They'll have their own room. Your room is still yours. This seemed to alleviate one worry, but Clara wasn't finished. Will you still have time to read me stories? Even with 2 babies? Julian moved closer, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. We will always have time for you, Clara. Always. Babies need a lot of care when they're very small, but that doesn't change how much we love you or how important you are. She considered this, then asked the question that revealed her deepest fear. Did you want more babies because I wasn't enough? My heart shattered at her words. Oh, Clara. I gathered her into my arms, blinking back tears. You are more than enough. You are perfect exactly as you are. The babies aren't replacements for you. They're additions to our family. You'll be their big sister. Julian added. That's a very special job. You'll be able to teach them things, show them how the world works, help them learn and grow. This perspective seemed to intrigue her. I could be like their teacher. Exactly. I smiled, relieved to see her considering a positive role. The best teacher they could have. Clara mulled this over, then unwrapped her big sister gift with growing enthusiasm. By the time she tried on the t-shirt and began examining her toy stethoscope, her initial worries seemed partially though not entirely allayed. Can I tell Grandma Eleanor? She asked, already reaching for Julian's phone. She loves babies. We're going to tell both grandmas and grandpas together. Julian explained. This weekend at a special family dinner. Clara nodded, accepting this plan. Then her eyes narrowed with sudden realization. Are 2 babies why your tummy was making you sick in the mornings? Yes. I laughed, impressed again by her perception. Twins can make mommies feel extra tired and sometimes a little sick. Do they kick? Can I feel them? Her curiosity was taking over now, fear giving way to fascination. Not yet. I placed her small hand on my stomach. They're still very tiny. But in a few months, you'll be able to feel them moving. The rest of the day was filled with Clara's questions, each more detailed than the last. How big were the babies right now? The size of grapes. Would they be identical? No, fraternal twins, which we explained as siblings born at the same time but looking different. Would they both be girls, or boys, or one of each? We didn't know yet. By evening, Clara had appointed herself official assistant in preparations for the twins, insisting on helping arrange pillows when I rested and declaring that the babies needed to hear her read stories too, even if they couldn't understand them yet. Julian watched her transformation from anxious to excited with visible relief. That went better than expected. He whispered as we tucked Clara in that night. For now. I cautioned. She's processing it intellectually. The emotional reality might hit later, especially when the babies actually arrive. We'll handle it together. Julian pressed a kiss to my forehead. Just like everything else. As I drifted off to sleep that night, Clara's question still echoing in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that telling our daughter had been the easy part. Informing the grandparents, particularly Robert Blackwood, would be an entirely different challenge. Have you ever watched a child struggle with big feelings about a major family change? Leave a comment below sharing how you helped little ones navigate new siblings or family transitions, and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more real family moments that touch your heart. The Blackwood family dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at Julian's parents' Manhattan penthouse. My father, David Rivera, would be joining us, a rare confluence of the 2 very different worlds that had shaped Clara's heritage. Dad arrived at our brownstone first, having flown in from Arizona where he'd retired after 30 years of teaching high school physics. At 69, he remained youthful in spirit, his salt and pepper hair and weathered face the only real indicators of his age. There's my princess, he exclaimed as Clara launched herself into his arms the moment he walked through the door. Have you been doing your science experiments? Clara nodded enthusiastically. Daddy helped me build a volcano last weekend. It exploded all over the kitchen. Dad raised an eyebrow at Julian, who shrugged good-naturedly. Baking soda and vinegar. Classic but effective. Though we might have miscalculated the quantities. The easy rapport between Julian and my father was one of the unexpected blessings of our reconciliation. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, the billionaire heir and the public school teacher, they had found common ground in their love for Clara and their shared interest in encouraging her curiosity about the world. As Clara dragged my father to see her latest art projects, Julian turned to me with a concerned expression. "How are you feeling?" The question had become his constant refrain since learning about the twins. "A little nauseous, but managing." I adjusted my loose-fitting dress, grateful that at 12 weeks my pregnancy wasn't yet visible to casual observers. "Tonight will be interesting." Julian squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Father may be difficult, but mother will be ecstatic. And your dad is always a calming presence." The dynamic between our parents remained complex. Eleanor had always treated my father with genuine warmth and respect, recognizing his intelligence and the values he'd instilled in me. Robert, however, viewed David Rivera as an unfortunate necessity to tolerate Clara's grandfather, but not someone he would ever consider a peer or equal. We arrived at the Blackwood penthouse precisely on time, Julian's ingrained punctuality overriding even my last-minute dash to the bathroom, another joy of first-trimester twins. Eleanor greeted us in the foyer, elegant as always in a cashmere sweater and pearls that probably cost more than my father's car. "Nora, David." She embraced my father warmly. "How wonderful to see you. The Arizona sun agrees with you." Dad returned the hug with genuine affection. "Eleanor, beautiful as ever. Thank you for including me in the family dinner." Clara had already spotted Robert in the living room and was showing him her latest drawing, a family portrait with stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, Clara, and, tellingly, 2 small circles near the stick figure representing me. "What are these?" Robert asked, pointing to the circles with a puzzled expression. Clara glanced at Julian and me with a conspiratorial smile. "It's a surprise. We're going to tell you at dinner." Eleanor caught this exchange, her shrewd eyes missing nothing as she ushered us all toward the dining room. A surprise? How intriguing. The Blackwood dining room was intimidatingly formal, a massive table that could seat 20, crystal chandeliers overhead, priceless artwork adorning the walls. For family dinners, Eleanor arranged seating at one end, creating a more intimate setting amidst the grandeur. As we took our places, Robert at the head, Eleanor to his right, Julian and I opposite each other, with Clara and my father rounding out the arrangement, I felt a familiar tension. This room had hosted countless uncomfortable conversations during my first marriage to Julian, meals where Robert questioned my career choices or Eleanor gently suggested more appropriate activities for a Blackwood wife. Tonight, however, the dynamic was different. Julian was different, more confident in his own priorities, less concerned with his father's approval. I was different, too secure in my role as Clara's mother, established in my career, no longer intimidated by Blackwood wealth or expectations. The first course had just been served when Robert addressed Julian directly. I reviewed the quarterly projections. His tone was casual but his eyes sharp. The Singapore expansion is falling behind schedule. Julian set down his fork. The projections are conservative. The development team is actually ahead of internal deadlines. Conservative projections lead to conservative results. Robert countered. And with your reduced involvement, Dad. Julian cut him off gently but firmly. We agreed no business discussion tonight. This is family time. Robert looked momentarily surprised, then nodded with grudging respect. You're right. My apologies, everyone. Eleanor smoothly redirected the conversation. Clara, tell Grandpa Robert about your science project at school. As Clara launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her class's butterfly habitat, complete with detailed observations of chrysalis development, I caught Julian's eye across the table. The subtle nod we exchanged acknowledged this small victory, establishing boundaries that Robert actually respected was progress indeed. When the main course arrived, perfectly prepared filet mignon for the adults, chicken tenders for Clara, Eleanor turned to us with a knowing smile. Now, about this surprise Clara mentioned. I'm absolutely dying of curiosity. Julian reached across the table for my hand, our signal that the moment had arrived. We do have some news to share. He began, his voice steady but eyes alight with barely contained excitement. Clara bounced in her seat. I'm going to be a big sister. Eleanor's hand flew to her heart. Nora, you're pregnant. Oh, how wonderful. Robert's expression shifted from surprise to calculation, the businessman assessing a new development's impact on existing plans. Congratulations. When are you due? Early May. I replied. But there's more. Julian couldn't contain his smile. We're having twins. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Eleanor gasped, tears springing to her eyes. My father's face broke into a broad grin. Even Robert looked genuinely stunned, his usual composure momentarily forgotten. Twins? Eleanor repeated, voice trembling with emotion. 2 babies. 2 more Blackwoods. Robert nodded, the implications clearly running through his mind. This changes timelines considerably. Julian tensed beside me. The babies won't be adjusting to any corporate timelines, father. Of course not. Robert waved away the comment. I meant your transition plan at the company. You'll need more flexibility than we discussed. The conversation exploded with questions. Were they identical or fraternal? Fraternal. Did we know genders yet? Too early to tell. How was I feeling? Tired but well. Was the doctor pleased with progress? Yes, everything looked normal so far. Through it all, Clara watched with intense focus, absorbing every detail, occasionally adding her own commentary. The babies are only as big as grapes right now, she informed her grandparents solemnly. But they're growing every day. Eleanor was already mentally redecorating the nursery. 2 of everything. She mused. We'll need to completely rethink the space. Perhaps converting the home office mother. Julian interrupted gently. Nora and I have already started planning the nursery. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but nonsense. Eleanor dismissed his objection with a wave. This calls for professional intervention. I'll have my interior designer visit next week. I caught Julian's eye, silently communicating that this was exactly the boundary crossing we had anticipated. He gave a slight nod, understanding the message. We're happy to consider suggestions. Julian said diplomatically. But all decisions about the nursery and the twins will be made by Nora and me. Eleanor looked momentarily taken aback, then recovered with grace. Of course, darling. I only want to help. My father, who had been quietly observing this exchange, spoke up. Twins are quite the adventure. My sister had twin boys. I remember how exhausted she was those first few months. Thank you, David, for that encouraging thought. Eleanor's tone was light but pointed. Dad smiled, unperturbed. But she also said it was the greatest joy of her life. Watching them develop together, their special bond. It's a unique privilege to parent twins. His simple, heartfelt words cut through the tension, reminding everyone of what truly mattered beyond nursery designs and corporate timelines. The remainder of dinner passed in unusually harmonious conversation, with Robert even sharing stories of Julian and his brother as children, tales I'd rarely heard during our first marriage when Robert had been more reserved, more focused on legacy than family memories. As dessert was served, chocolate soufflé for the adults, ice cream for Clara. Robert cleared his throat, commanding attention in his characteristic way. I have something to say. He began, his expression unusually solemn. With the announcement of twins, the Blackwood future is secure for another generation. This calls for proper recognition. Julian tensed beside me, wary of his father's formal tone. I would like to establish trust funds for the twins, as we did for Clara. Robert continued. and to ensure they have the same advantages and opportunities that befit their position in the family. That's very generous, Father, Julian said carefully. But as with Clara, Nora and I will make the decisions about how the twins are raised and educated. Robert nodded, his expression inscrutable. Understood. But there is one more thing. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Eleanor and I had this made for Clara when we learned of her existence. We'd like to do the same for the twins when they arrive. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold bracelet sized for a child's wrist, engraved with the Blackwood family crest and Clara's initials. It was clearly an expensive piece, but more significantly, it represented Robert's acknowledgement of Clara as a true Blackwood heir. It's beautiful, I said sincerely, touched by the gesture despite my wariness of Robert's motives. Clara examined the bracelet with wide eyes. Is it really for me? When you're a bit older, Eleanor explained gently. It's a special Blackwood tradition. The remainder of the evening passed in relative harmony, with plans made for regular family dinners during the pregnancy and promises of help once the twins arrived. As we prepared to leave, Robert drew Julian aside for a private conversation while Eleanor showed Clara her collection of Faberge eggs, a special treat reserved for her best behavior. My father helped me into my coat, his expression thoughtful. An interesting family you've married into. Twice. I smiled wryly. They grow on you. Eventually. Dad glanced toward Robert and Julian, still deep in conversation across the room. Julian's father is concerned about his corporate legacy. Mine's sitting on your shoulder. I followed his gaze to where Clara had climbed onto Julian's back, already half asleep after the excitement of the evening. You're right. And Julian understands that now, even if it took us separating and finding each other again for him to see it. As we rode home in the car service Julian had arranged, Clara fast asleep between us, I asked about his conversation with Robert. He wants me to reconsider stepping back from Blackwood Industries, Julian said quietly. He believes I can balance both running the company and being present for the family. What do you think? I asked, watching his profile in the darkness. Julian was quiet for a moment, his hand resting protectively on Clara's sleeping form. I think he doesn't understand that I'm not him. That I've seen what his kind of balance cost our family cost us the first time around. I won't make that mistake again, the conviction in his voice reassured me, but I couldn't help wondering if Robert Blackwood would accept his son's decision so easily. The announcement of twins had raised the stakes in the ongoing negotiation between legacy and family, between the Blackwood name and the life Julian was choosing to build with us. As the weeks passed and my pregnancy progressed, the initial excitement gave way to practical realities. At 16 weeks, my regular checkup revealed the genders of our twins, a boy and a girl, one of each, as Clara had hopefully predicted. Julian's joy at this news was matched only by Eleanor's, who immediately began planning gender-specific gifts despite our repeated requests for restraint. The physical toll of carrying twins became increasingly apparent as I entered the second trimester. Simple tasks left me breathless, my body working overtime to support two growing babies. Dr. Chen monitored me closely, concerned about my blood pressure, which had begun creeping upward. I think we should discuss reducing your work hours, she suggested during my 20-week appointment. Twin pregnancies at your age carry additional risks. Hypertension can lead to preeclampsia, which would endanger both you and the babies. Julian, who had rearranged his schedule to attend every appointment, immediately supported the idea. Could you work from home more? He asked as we left the doctor's office. Delegate some of your responsibilities. I resisted initially, reluctant to step back from the research project I'd spent years developing. But as fatigue and discomfort increased, I had to acknowledge the wisdom of their concern. The compromise came in the form of a modified schedule: 3 days in the lab, 2 working from home, with strict limitations on hours and stress. Julian transformed our home office into a comfortable workspace that allowed me to monitor research progress remotely while still prioritizing my health. Meanwhile, Clara's initial enthusiasm about the twins began to waver as the reality of impending change became more concrete. The first sign came when Julian and I began converting the guest room into a nursery. "Why do they need so many things?" Clara asked, watching as delivery men brought in 2 cribs, a changing table, and a rocking chair. "They're just babies. Babies need special furniture," Julian explained patiently. "Remember how we talked about this?" Clara frowned, kicking at the carpet. "You're spending a lot of time getting ready for them. We still have time for you, sweetheart," I assured her, though truthfully, my energy was increasingly limited. "How about we read an extra story tonight?" She shrugged, a new dismissiveness that worried me. "I'm going to play in my room." Julian and I exchanged concerned glances as she walked away. "She's struggling," I said softly. "She'll adjust." Julian sounded more confident than he looked. "It's a big change for all of us." The following week brought another concerning incident. Clara's preschool called, requesting a meeting to discuss her recent behavior. She's become withdrawn during group activities. Her teacher explained when we arrived for the conference. And yesterday, she told another child that her parents were too busy for her because they had 2 new babies coming to replace her. My heart sank at these words. We've been very careful to reassure her that's not the case, I explained. The teacher nodded sympathetically. It's actually quite common with soon-to-be older siblings, especially when the pregnancy is visible and preparations are underway. Children often understand intellectually that they aren't being replaced, but emotionally, they feel the shifting of attention. What can we do to help her? Julian asked, his expression pained. The teacher suggested several strategies. Special one-on-one time with each parent, involving Clara in age-appropriate preparations for the twins, and most importantly, validating her feelings rather than simply dismissing her concerns. We implemented these suggestions immediately. Julian began taking Clara on special Saturday morning adventures, just the 2 of them visiting museums, parks, or her favorite bookstore. I established a daily after-dinner ritual where Clara and I would snuggle on the couch, talking about her day and reading together, regardless of how exhausted I felt. These efforts helped, but Clara's worries surfaced in unexpected ways. She became fiercely protective of her possessions, labeling toys and books with handwritten, Clara's only, signs. She insisted on sitting between Julian and me during family movie nights, physically inserting herself between us. Most concerning was her regression in some areas, occasional bedwetting, baby talk, and tantrums we hadn't seen since she was 3. She's afraid of losing her place, my father observed during one of his now regular video calls. Of being forgotten when the babies arrive. How do we convince her that won't happen? I asked, frustrated by our inability to ease her fears despite our best efforts. You can't, Dad replied simply. Not with words alone. She won't believe it until she sees it, until the babies are here and she discovers she's still just as loved, just as important. This realistic assessment was both comforting and concerning. We would need to be even more intentional about maintaining Clara's sense of security once the twins arrived and demanded so much of our attention and energy. As my pregnancy reached the 26-week mark, new complications arose. My blood pressure continued to rise despite medication and reduced stress. At a routine checkup, Dr. Chen detected protein in my urine, an early warning sign of preeclampsia. I'm admitting you to the hospital for observation, she said firmly after reviewing my test results. I don't like these numbers, Nora. We need to monitor you and the babies more closely. Julian's face paled, but his voice remained calm for my benefit. How long will she need to stay? At least overnight, possibly longer. Dr. Chen's expression was serious. At this stage, our goal is to keep the babies inside as long as possible, ideally at least until 32 weeks. But Nora's health is the priority. If preeclampsia develops fully, we'll need to deliver regardless of gestational age. The reality of potential premature delivery hit us both hard. Julian arranged for his mother to pick up Clara from school while he stayed with me during the hospital admission process. The barrage of tests, monitors, and medication adjustments was overwhelming, but not as overwhelming as the thought of our twins arriving dangerously early. By evening, I was settled in a private room, hooked to monitors tracking my blood pressure and the twins' heartbeats. Julian sat beside the bed, simultaneously fielding work calls, coordinating Clara's care, and trying to maintain a positive demeanor for my benefit. "You don't have to stay," I told him, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes. "Go home to Clara. She needs you right now. She's with my mother." Julian replied, reaching for my hand. "You need me too." The steady beeping of the twins' heartbeat monitors provided reassuring background noise as we discussed contingency plans, what would happen if bed rest was ordered, how we would manage Clara's routine, and whether Julian should accelerate his transition away from daily operations at Blackwood Industries. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. To my surprise, Robert Blackwood entered, looking uncharacteristically concerned. "Eleanor called me," he explained, approaching the bed with unusual hesitation. "She's staying with Clara tonight. I thought I should check on things here." The fact that Robert had come to the hospital himself rather than sending an assistant or simply calling was significant. Julian appeared equally surprised by his father's presence. "Thank you for coming, Father." Julian stood, the tension in his shoulders visible. "The doctors are keeping Nora overnight for observation. Her blood pressure is concerning." Robert nodded, his gaze moving to the monitors, then to my pale face. "What can I do?" The simple question, asked without his usual commanding tone, caught me off guard. "We're managing," I said, unsure how to respond to this unfamiliar version of Robert Blackwood. "Nonsense." Robert dismissed my statement with a wave of his hand, more like his usual self. "There must be something. Specialists to consult. Arrangements to make." Julian and I exchanged glances, silently communicating as we often did in difficult moments. The help we actually needed wasn't something I expected Robert would be willing to provide. "Clara needs stability right now," Julian finally said. "With Nora in the hospital and the possibility of extended bed rest, she's going to be confused and frightened." Robert frowned slightly. "Isn't that what the nanny is for? She needs family." Julian's voice held a note of challenge. "People who love her, not employees who care for her." To my surprise, Robert didn't bristle at this implied criticism. Instead, he considered it thoughtfully. "Eleanor mentioned Clara seems upset about the twins. Worried about her place in the family." "She is," I confirmed, watching Robert's reaction carefully. "It's a normal response, but still difficult for her. And for us, seeing her struggle." Robert was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he straightened his shoulders, decision made. "I'll clear my schedule tomorrow. I can take her to that science museum she enjoys. Perhaps the planetarium as well." Julian stared at his father in undisguised shock. "You want to take Clara for the day? Just you? Unless you object." Robert's tone was oddly defensive. "I am her grandfather, after all." The offer was so unexpected, so contrary to Robert's usual delegation of family matters to Eleanor or staff, that neither Julian nor I knew quite how to respond. Robert Blackwood, who rarely attended school functions or family outings that didn't involve publicity opportunities, was volunteering to spend an entire day with his 4-year-old granddaughter. "That would be wonderful," I finally said, seeing the genuine effort behind his offer. "Clara would love it." Robert nodded, his usual confidence returning. "Good. That's settled then." He turned to Julian. "You'll stay with Nora, I assume?" "Of course," Julian replied, still looking slightly stunned by this turn of events. "I'll have my assistant reschedule tomorrow's board meeting." Robert continued. "The Tokyo acquisition can wait. Family matters take precedence." With those words I never thought I'd hear from Robert Blackwood's lips. He nodded once more and departed, leaving Julian and me to process this unexpected development. If your in-laws have ever surprised you by stepping up when you least expected it, comment boundaries matter below. Sometimes the people we think are the least likely to change are just waiting for the right moment to show a different side of themselves. My hospital stay extended to 3 days as the doctors worked to stabilize my blood pressure. During this time, our family dynamics shifted in ways none of us could have anticipated. Robert did indeed take Clara to the Science Museum, returning her to the hospital afterward with a new telescope he'd purchased and a detailed report of everything they'd learned about space exploration. Clara was animated in a way we hadn't seen in weeks, chattering excitedly about how Grandpa Robert had arranged a special behind-the-scenes tour where she'd touched an actual meteorite and talked to a real astronomer. He knows a lot about stars. She informed us seriously. Almost as much as Grandpa David. The comparison to my father's high praise from Clara indicated that something significant had transpired during their outing. Later, when Clara was distracted by a nurse who had brought her juice and cookies, Julian questioned his father. "What happened today?" he asked quietly. "Clara seems different." Robert's expression remained neutral. "We had a conversation. About family. About her role as the oldest grandchild." "What kind of conversation?" Julian pressed, clearly concerned about what his father might have told Clara. I explained the importance of the oldest. Robert said simply. How they lead the way. Set the example. How the family looks to them first. Julian frowned slightly. "Father, she's 4. She doesn't need that kind of pressure." Robert shook his head. "You misunderstand. I told her that as the first grandchild, she has a special place no one can ever take from her. That her siblings will look up to her, learn from her. That being first means she will always have something the others don't. She'll always be the one who made me a grandfather." The thoughtfulness behind these words, the recognition of exactly what Clara needed to hear was so unexpected that Julian could only stare at his father in silent amazement. "I also told her," Robert continued, lowering his voice further, "that when I was young, my older brother died before I was born. That I always wished I'd had a big brother to show me the way. That her little brother and sister are very lucky to have her." This personal revelation, something Robert had never shared with Julian, explained so much about the man, about his driven personality and focus on legacy. It was a window into Robert Blackwood that neither Julian nor I had ever been permitted to see. "I didn't know that," Julian said quietly. "About your brother. It's not something I discuss." Robert's tone made it clear this momentary vulnerability was not an invitation for further conversation on the topic. But it seemed relevant to Clara's situation. When I was released from the hospital the following day, it was with strict instructions for modified bed rest at home, limited activity, regular monitoring, and immediate return to the hospital if certain symptoms appeared. The twins were developing well but remained at risk if my condition worsened. The next few weeks established a new family pattern. Julian rearranged his schedule to work primarily from home, attending only essential meetings in person. Eleanor took charge of Clara's school transportation and activities, developing a surprisingly effective co-grandparenting relationship with my father, who extended his visit indefinitely to help manage the household. Most surprisingly, Robert began making regular appearances at our home, often arriving with science-related gifts for Clara and updates on Blackwood Industries for Julian. He would sit with me for short periods, awkwardly inquiring about my health and the twins' development before finding Clara for their now-established ritual of reading about space exploration together. It was during one of these visits, as I approached my 30th week of pregnancy, that the delicate balance we had established completely collapsed. The day began normally enough. Julian was working in the home office, taking video calls while keeping an eye on me as I rested on the living room sofa. Clara was at school, scheduled to be picked up by Eleanor for her weekly piano lesson. My father was grocery shopping, having insisted on taking over meal preparation to ensure I was eating properly for the twins. I had been experiencing mild discomfort all morning, nothing alarming, just the usual pregnancy aches amplified by carrying twins. But shortly after noon, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen, followed by another, more intense contraction. "Julian!" I called, trying to keep panic from my voice. "Something's wrong." He appeared instantly, phone still in hand, mid-conversation. "I need to call you back," he said to whoever was on the line, then disconnected without waiting for a response. "What is it? What's happening?" "Pain," I managed, as another contraction gripped me. "Too strong. Too regular." Julian helped me to my feet, but as I stood, I felt a rush of fluid. "My water's breaking," I gasped, the reality hitting with terrifying clarity. "It's too soon. They're not ready." Julian's face went pale, but his actions remained calm and efficient. He called Dr. Chen, described the symptoms, and received instructions to bring me to the hospital immediately. Then he called his parents, asking Eleanor to keep Clara for the afternoon and explaining the emergency. As he helped me to the car, another contraction hit with such intensity that I doubled over, unable to walk further. Julian didn't hesitate, he simply lifted me into his arms, carrying me the remaining distance and settling me carefully into the passenger seat. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of pain and fear. Julian drove with uncharacteristic aggression, one hand on the wheel, the other clutching mine as I breathed through increasingly frequent contractions. "They're coming too fast," I said between pained breaths. 30 weeks is too early, Julian. Modern NICUs can support babies from 24 weeks. He replied, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Our twins are strong. You're strong. We're going to get through this." When we arrived at the hospital, things moved with dizzying speed. Dr. Chen was waiting, along with a team of specialists. Monitors were attached, ultrasounds performed, medication administered to try slowing the contractions. "The twins are in distress," Dr. Chen announced after reviewing the monitor readings. "The boy's heart rate is dropping during contractions, and your blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to perform an emergency C-section." "No," I protested, panic rising. "Can't you stop the labor? Give them more time." Dr. Chen's expression was compassionate but firm. "Nora, you're developing severe preeclampsia. Continuing the pregnancy puts both you and the twins at serious risk. We need to deliver now." Julian, still holding my hand, leaned close. "I'm scared too," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. "But I trust Dr. Chen. And I can't lose any of you. Please." The vulnerability in his plea broke through my fear. I nodded, allowing the medical team to prepare me for surgery. Julian was whisked away to don sterile garments while I was transferred to an operating room, the bright lights and clinical efficiency both reassuring and terrifying. Everything happened quickly after that. The surgical team worked with practiced coordination, the anesthesiologist ensuring I remained conscious but pain-free. Julian appeared at my side, his presence a lifeline in the controlled chaos of the operating room. "You're doing great," he murmured, stroking my hair as the procedure began. "They're almost here, Nora. Our babies are almost here." I felt tugging and pressure but no pain as Dr. Chen worked. Then, suddenly, a thin cry filled the room. "Our son, extracted first, impossibly small but undeniably alive. He's breathing on his own," Dr. Chen announced as she passed him to the waiting NICU team. 5 pounds, 1 ounce. Good size for 30 weeks. Moments later, our daughter joined her brother, her cry softer but equally determined. 4 pounds, 8 ounces. She's pink and responsive. Julian's eyes filled with tears above his surgical mask as he watched the NICU team work on our tiny twins. "They're here," he said, voice thick with emotion. "They're really here." I caught only glimpses of our babies as they were stabilized, assessed, and placed in transport incubators. They seemed impossibly fragile, tiny red faces, translucent skin, bodies that could fit in a single hand. Before I could truly process their arrival, they were being rushed to the NICU, Julian torn between staying with me and following them. Go. I urged him. Stay with the babies. I'll be fine. After he left, the surgical team completed my procedure, Dr. Chen explaining that everything had gone as well as possible under the circumstances. As I was moved to recovery, exhaustion and medication pulled me toward sleep, but not before a nurse showed me photos Julian had sent from the NICU. Our twins, now connected to monitors and breathing apparatus, but stable. Alive. Fighting. When I woke hours later, Julian was beside my bed, his expression a complex mixture of joy, fear, and exhaustion. How are they? I asked immediately, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube used during surgery. Stable. He took my hand gently. They're so small, Nora, but the doctors say they're doing remarkably well for 30 weekers. Our son Julian's voice caught. He's already breathing mostly on his own. Our daughter needs more support, but her vitals are strong. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by concern. Have you called everyone? Does Clara know? Julian nodded. Mother and father are here. They're with the twins now. Your dad is bringing Clara once you're moved to a regular room. We thought it would be less frightening if she saw you first, then the babies. The thought of our 4-year-old seeing her tiny siblings in their medical environment, connected to wires and tubes, created a new wave of anxiety. Will it scare her? Seeing them like that? We've prepared her as best we can. Julian assured me. Your father explained everything in his teacher's way, very matter-of-fact, very scientific. And the NICU has a child life specialist who will help Clara understand what she's seeing. As Julian updated me on the twins' condition, each weighing less than 5 pounds, each requiring careful monitoring but so far avoiding the most serious complications of prematurity, I felt the enormous weight of what lay ahead. Weeks, possibly months of NICU stays. The constant fear of setbacks or complications. The challenge of dividing our attention between fragile newborns in the hospital and a 4-year-old at home who needed reassurance that she hadn't been forgotten. What have we named them? I asked suddenly, realizing we had never finalized our choices. Julian smiled tiredly. I thought we should wait for you. But I've been calling them Fighter 1 and Fighter 2. The nurses seem to approve. Would you like to see them? He asked, reaching for his phone. I took more pictures. Before he could show me, the door opened to reveal my father carrying Clara, who looked both excited and frightened, her small face solemn as she took in the hospital room and my weakened state. Mommy. She wiggled out of my father's arms and approached the bed cautiously. Did the babies come out? Yes, sweetheart. I held out my arms to her, wincing slightly at the movement but needing her close. Your brother and sister decided to arrive early. Clara allowed Julian to lift her onto the bed beside me, careful of my incision site. Are they very small? Her voice held both curiosity and concern. They are. Julian confirmed, showing her the photos on his phone. They need to stay in special beds called incubators until they grow bigger and stronger. Clara studied the images with intense focus. They have tubes and wires. Are they broken? No, honey. I smoothed her hair back from her face. The tubes and wires are helping them breathe and eat until they can do it all by themselves. They came out earlier than they were supposed to, so they need extra help for a while. Clara nodded, processing this information. Can I see them? The real them, not just pictures. Julian and I exchanged glances. Yes. I decided. But there are rules in the NICU, the special baby place. You'll need to wash your hands very carefully, speak quietly, and follow all the nurses' instructions. Can you do that? Clara straightened her shoulders, suddenly looking older than her 4 years. I'll be very good. I'm their big sister. I have to show them how to do things right. The unexpected maturity in her response brought tears to my eyes. Yes, you are. The very best big sister they could have. As Julian helped Clara down from the bed, promising to take her to the NICU after I'd rested a bit longer, my father approached and squeezed my hand. You did good, kiddo. His voice was gruff with emotion. Those are two tough little fighters in there. Just like their mom. The door opened again, revealing Eleanor and Robert Blackwood. Eleanor's eyes were red from crying, but she smiled bravely as she approached the bed. They're beautiful, Nora. Perfect in every way. She clasped my hand in both of hers. The nurses say they're doing extraordinarily well, considering their early arrival. Robert stood slightly behind her, his expression unusually open. They look like Julian did. He said gruffly. Same determination. You can see it already. Clara tugged at Robert's sleeve. Grandpa Robert, I'm going to see the babies soon. I have to be very careful because they're extra small. Robert knelt to her level, a gesture I had never seen from him before. You'll do wonderfully. He told her seriously. And do you know why? Clara shook her head. Because you're the oldest. Robert continued. And the oldest always leads the way. Shows everyone else how it's done. The pride in Clara's expression as she absorbed these words made it clear that Robert had found exactly the right approach to help our daughter embrace her role as big sister rather than feel threatened by it. As I watched the interaction between Clara and her grandparents, Eleanor showing her photos she'd taken in the NICU, Robert explaining the monitors and equipment with surprising patience, my father adding scientific context in his teacher's voice, I realized something profound had happened. Our crisis had transformed not just Julian and me, not just our relationship to each other and our children, but our entire extended family. The twins' premature arrival had broken down barriers and pretenses, forcing everyone to reveal their true priorities, their deeper selves. Julian must have sensed my thoughts, because he sat beside me on the bed, taking my hand as we watched our family circle close protectively around Clara. They'll be all right. He whispered, meaning not just our tiny twins fighting in the NICU, but all of us, this imperfect, complicated, loving family we had created together. We'll all be all right. And in that moment, despite the uncertainty ahead, the weeks of NICU vigils and sleepless nights that awaited us, I believed him. Life's most important lessons often come in waiting rooms. Share this video if you've ever found strength in your darkest hour, and subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories for more tales of family, forgiveness, and finding your way through life's unexpected challenges. The weeks that followed our twins' dramatic arrival tested our family in ways we could never have anticipated, but also revealed strengths we didn't know we possessed. James Robert Blackwood and Elena Nora Blackwood, named for both sets of grandparents, remained in the NICU for 8 weeks, gradually growing stronger, overcoming the typical hurdles of premature birth with a determination that amazed even the experienced NICU staff. Julian practically lived at the hospital those first weeks, working remotely from the NICU waiting room, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, leaving only to spend essential time with Clara. I joined him as soon as my own recovery permitted, the two of us establishing a tag-team approach to ensure the twins always had a parent nearby. Clara rose to the occasion in ways that astonished us. She became the NICU nurse's favorite visitor, carefully washing her hands without complaint, speaking in hushed tones, asking intelligent questions about each tube and wire. When finally allowed to touch her siblings through the incubator openings, she did so with such gentleness that the nurses often used her as an example for other young siblings. I get to be their teacher, she explained seriously when a nurse complimented her behavior. Grandpa Robert says the oldest shows everyone how things work. The grandparents, meanwhile, formed an unlikely alliance. My father extended his stay indefinitely, moving from our guest room to a small apartment nearby that Robert insisted on providing. Eleanor organized a schedule ensuring Clara maintained her routine school activities, proper meals, while Julian and I focused on the twins. And Robert, most surprisingly, became a regular NICU visitor, often arriving in the early morning before work or late evening after board meetings, silently watching his tiny grandchildren with an expression of wonder that transformed his usually stern features. One evening, as I sat between the twins' incubators, Robert appeared with 2 small packages carefully wrapped in silver paper. "These are for them," he said, handing me the gifts with uncharacteristic hesitation. "When they're ready." I opened the packages to find 2 gold bracelets, matching the one he'd given Clara, each engraved with the Blackwood crest and the twins' initials. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "They're beautiful." Robert nodded, then surprised me by pulling up a chair beside James's incubator. He watched his grandson's tiny chest rise and fall for several minutes before speaking again. "I was wrong, you know," he said quietly. "About many things." I waited, sensing he had more to say. "When Julian married you the first time, I thought he was making a mistake." Robert continued, his gaze still on James. "I thought he needed someone who understood our world, our responsibilities. Someone who would put the Blackwood legacy first." I remained silent, letting him speak without interruption. "I failed to see that he needed exactly what he found in you, someone who challenged him, who saw him as Julian, not just as the Blackwood heir." He glanced at me briefly. "Someone who made him a better man than I taught him to be." The admission, so contrary to everything Robert had communicated during my first marriage to Julian, left me momentarily speechless. "These children." Robert gestured to the twins. "And Clara. They're the true Blackwood legacy. Not the company, not the fortune. Family. That's what matters. That's what lasts." He stood abruptly, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "Tell Julian I'll handle the board meeting tomorrow. He should stay here, with them. With you." As Robert left, I realized I was witnessing something I never thought possible: Robert Blackwood redefining his values, reprioritizing his life around something more meaningful than corporate success or social standing. This transformation wasn't limited to Robert. Eleanor, always more emotionally accessible than her husband but still bound by social expectations, blossomed into a hands-on grandmother who thought nothing of canceling charity luncheons to take Clara to the park or sitting beside the incubators reading stories to the twins who were still too small to come home. My father, the retired physics teacher who had always lived modestly, found himself in the strange position of advisor to the Blackwood family, Robert seeking his counsel on educational approaches for the grandchildren, Eleanor valuing his practical perspective on family matters. Their unlikely friendship bridged worlds that had once seemed impossibly distant. But the most profound change was in Julian. The crisis of the twins' premature birth crystallized priorities he had been moving toward since discovering Clara's existence. He formally stepped back from daily operations at Blackwood Industries, maintaining his position on the board but delegating most responsibilities to a management team. Instead, he focused on the foundation's healthcare initiatives, particularly those supporting families with premature infants. In the NICU waiting room, I overheard him on a call with his father, his voice firm but respectful. "This isn't negotiable," he said clearly. "The twins need me here, not in Tokyo. The acquisition can proceed without me." After a pause, he continued. "You taught me that family comes first, Father. I'm finally listening." When he ended the call, I asked what his father had said in response. Julian smiled slightly. He said he was proud of me. First time I can remember him saying those words. 8 weeks after their birth, James and Elena were finally strong enough to come home, still smaller than average, still requiring careful monitoring, but healthy enough to leave the hospital's protective environment. The day of their discharge was both joyous and terrifying: joy at finally having our entire family under one roof, terror at leaving behind the security of constant medical supervision. Clara had spent the previous week helping prepare the nursery, insisting on arranging stuffed animals in the cribs and demonstrating to her grandparents exactly how the babies should be positioned, information she had gleaned from careful observation of the NICU nurses. When we finally arrived home with the twins, our brownstone was transformed. A welcome banner hung in the foyer, clearly made by Clara with help from Eleanor. My father had prepared a celebratory meal. Even Robert was present, having left the office early, an unprecedented occurrence to witness his grandchildren's homecoming. "Welcome home, James and Elena," Clara announced as Julian carried the twins' car seats through the door. "I'm your big sister, and I have everything ready for you." The pride in her voice, the complete absence of jealousy or resentment, brought tears to my eyes. Somehow, through this difficult journey, our daughter had found security in her role as big sister rather than feeling displaced by the new arrivals. As we settled into our new reality, sleepless nights, feeding schedules, the constant vigilance required by premature twins, our extended family remained steadfastly present. Eleanor organized a rotation of help that included herself, my father, and even Robert, who surprised everyone by revealing a talent for calming James during fussy periods. 1 month after the twins came home, as I sat in the nursery rocking Elena while Julian gave James his bottle, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this point. From our failed first marriage to Julian discovering Clara's existence, from our cautious reconciliation to the unexpected pregnancy with twins, from the terror of their premature birth to the joy of finally having our complete family together, it had been a path neither of us could have anticipated or planned. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, noticing my pensive expression. "Everything," I replied softly, watching Elena's tiny hand grasp my finger. "How we got here. How different everything is from what we expected." Julian nodded, his gaze moving from James in his arms to me and Elena, then to the baby monitor where we could see Clara sleeping peacefully in her room. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd known about Clara from the beginning?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remind myself that we weren't ready then. We needed to grow separately before we could truly be together." Julian considered this, adjusting James as he finished his bottle. "I think you're right. I needed to learn what really mattered. You needed to discover your strength. We both needed to understand what we were fighting for." As if on cue, Clara appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Is it morning?" "No, sweetheart." I smiled, patting the ottoman beside me. "It's still nighttime. The babies just needed a midnight snack." She climbed up beside me, leaning against my side as she watched Elena with drowsy fascination. "Can I help?" "You can talk to her," Julian suggested. "She likes hearing your voice." Clara straightened, taking this responsibility seriously. "Hello, Elena. I'm your big sister," she began in a soft, sing-song voice. "When you're bigger, I'll teach you about butterflies and planets and how to tie your shoes." As Clara continued her gentle monologue, Julian caught my eye over the heads of our children, all 3 of our children, together in one room, surrounded by love despite the complicated path that had brought us here. "This is it, isn't it?" he said quietly. "This is what we were meant to build together." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Not a perfect family by conventional standards, not the smooth, predictable journey we might have planned, but something real and resilient, a family forged through challenge, strengthened by adversity, bound together not just by blood or name but by deliberate, daily choice. Outside the nursery window, dawn was breaking, soft light illuminating our brownstone, our neighborhood, our city. A new day for our family, imperfect and exhausted but complete in all the ways that truly mattered. If you believe that families come in all shapes and sizes, built not just through birth but through choices and challenges overcome together, please subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from unexpected journeys, and that true family is created day by day, choice by choice, love by love. Because in the end, it's not about perfect timing or ideal circumstances or fairy tale narratives. It's about showing up when it matters most. It's about redefining what family means when life doesn't follow your plan. It's about discovering that sometimes, the longest, most difficult roads lead to exactly where you were meant to be all along.